When things go sideways, staying calm is like a CTO's superpower.
Welcome to the Team Amplifier Podcast. I'm your host, Byron Summerdahl. Here you'll be inspired by industry leaders who build flourishing tech teams. Stay tuned and prepare to be amplified.
3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, we're here today with Ben Shichman, and we're going to be talking about meetings and maybe even letting people opt out of meetings. I feel like that's kind of a dangerous topic, but let's just give it a chance and let's see what's going to happen. So Ben is an experienced B2B and e-com leader, recovering musician, and snowboarder. Now a devoted dad and family chef. Hey, Ben, how you doing? Tell us more about what you got going on.
Great to be here. And thanks for having me. Right now, I'm really focused on fractional CTO services, and I've been doing that for quite a while. And I've been working with a wide breadth of businesses, from publicly traded companies all the way down to startups and everywhere in between, e-commerce brands, B2B SaaS companies, you name it. There's a lot of need out there, and it's a lot of fun to work.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's an interesting niche too that you're going for, specifically SaaS and e-com. Any reason why those are good niches, just in case anybody else is out there wondering which niche they should focus on?
Yeah, I think there's just a constant growth in both. There's, as technologists, we all know that there's a constant churn in tools. There's all sorts of B2B offerings out there, and there's new ones springing up all the time. Similarly with e-com, there's new e-com brands springing up all the time. And for those who are more established, there's the need to keep up with the competition or exceed them. So there seems to be always developing challenges in both.
So Ben, we want to get to know you a little bit more. And one of the ways that I know that get to know people is to find out what they read. And also I like to build my own library and find new books to be reading as well, on Audible or in my Kindle. So help me out. What's another book I should be reading? What's a book that you've been reading recently that made an impact on you?
Well, recently, actually, at my wife's recommendation, I've been reading A World Without Email by Cal Newport. It supports the idea of focused, intentional work and challenges the default overload of meetings and messages, especially in the current day.
I like the title. I like it a lot. I'm going to add that to my Audible list right now and get on that. Hopefully there's an audio version.
No, I mean, he really talks a lot about the hyperactive hive mind and where everyone's responding to all the constant pings we're getting, Slack and text and emails and, whatever messaging platform you have, instead of doing work. And it just made me reflect, especially in the context of the meetings we're going to be talking about today.
Well, in the pursuit of trying to get to know you better and make sure that we are humanizing our guests while we're trying to humanize tech leadership, we can't escape this next step in the process. It's confession time. So tell me about an embarrassing mistake that you've made as a tech leader. And like I said before, keep it lighthearted and fun. Don't bring the time that people died.
It's not that dark. Here's what I'll never forget. I was CTO of a publicly traded company for the first time, and it was time for the very first earnings call that I was going to be a part of with that executive team. So kind of a big moment, right? So we're all gathered in this fancy boardroom, and investor relations is on edge because they're running the show. The call's about to start. And, as a CTO, they kind of look to you just like, okay, the infrastructure teams are reporting to you, so you're in charge of making sure everything's going to work when we kick off the call. Except there was one problem. I had never actually tested the speakerphone. I tested everything else. I tested the software that we were using. I tested the projector on the screen so everyone could see the callers, but I hadn't actually tested the speakerphones. So the call's scheduled to begin, and of course, it's dead silence. The phone's not working, no audio, no connection, just dead air. Investor relations is like panicking, and people are scrambling. The CEO's looking at me and glaring, and you can feel the tension just building. But I just took a deep breath and actually just pulled out my iPhone and called up the IR company, put them on speakerphone, and we ended up running that entire call through my speakerphone, through my iPhone, just sitting there in the middle of the table. So it certainly wasn't glamorous, but we got through it. And honestly, it taught me two important things. First, always test your stuff, always. But more importantly, when things go sideways, staying calm is like a CTO's superpower.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, speakerphones just tend to work. Like, but we don't think to test the speakerphone because they just work every time, it seems like. But
I think it's back to that. Let's not make too many assumptions, because that's exactly what got me into that.
yeah, good story. Good story. So we're talking about meetings, and but one especially interesting and maybe controversial aspect of them, which is letting our people opt out of meetings. So I'll tell you what, we need to unpack this so that everybody kind of understands what we're talking about and what we're not talking about, and then we can get into the rest of it. So what do we mean by letting our team opt out of meetings?
All right. Well, I think we all know that as an organization grows and there's more and more people, more and more stakeholders, there is a general preponderance of meetings. They tend to grow. And it's very easy to not only see your calendar get filled up, but, many of your direct reports, or even your indirect reports, see their calendars start to get filled up with these meetings. And as you're growing, you'll start to see that has a demonstrable impact on your productivity, of course, because you're constantly context switching, which is going to it's disruptive for everyone, especially your more junior team members. And, we're not giving people the ability to focus and have their time to really just think. So, with this, it just got me thinking about, like, how can I give my team more trust and autonomy? Like, I didn't want them opting out of my one-on-ones with me, but when there's a meeting with 20 people and 5 people from my team, like, does everyone need to be there? And it started more casually with, hey, if you feel like you don't need to be in this meeting, you can get up and leave and I won't be upset with you. And kind of was slow to take hold because, people don't always trust that's what you actually mean. But it was really, people began to understand that I was giving them the agency to manage their own time and making sure that they understand that presence doesn't equal performance, to really kind of separate the notion of, like, well, I went to a bunch of meetings. It's like, well, that's not about accomplishment then.
So does this work for people at multiple levels of seniority? Or
Mhm.
do you feel like it kind of something that you can give them that agency at a higher level only? Like, I'm
No,
wondering
actually,
if there's
I found that within the technology organization, let's just start there, just communicating that clearly to the entire team. Now, in general, junior team members are going to be required to go to fewer meetings just by design of an organization. But it will happen. And how can we lessen that impact? Similarly, you've got a couple of director or VPs reporting to you. Their time's very valuable. It's very expensive. And they're probably stretched. So how can you help maximize their productivity? Again, as I was saying, as the organization grows, you start seeing invites from other departments for members of your own team.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but they may not understand the impact that has on your productivity.
So I'm kind of I'm overlaying this idea over some memories from, well, even my current development teams, but I used to manage much larger development teams. And like when a grooming session, for example,
Hmm.
when you want the developers to be there, you want the QA engineers to be there, you want everybody to kind of be in the same room and in a way so that the developers and everybody that's involved really get the vision for what this feature is supposed to be like.
Mhm.
And, the more information that they have and that they understand, the better the feature is going to be, or maybe they won't go off chasing rabbits for 2 weeks when really what you wanted was this little thing. If they can be a part of the conversation and really, hear the heart of the product owner as they're explaining it. As a CTO, thinking about, okay, do I give my developers and my QA engineers the option to not attend that meeting? That feels scary. But
Right. I mean, everything has to have boundaries, right? So every relationship in your personal life and your business life has to have appropriate boundaries. So a lot of that, just setting that expectation with the teams. Hey, this is the suite of meetings that I need you to attend, or really can't be opted out of unless you can come to me and we can talk about it. And that generally includes all the ritual meetings in Scrum. It's funny you bring that up because that was an initial one that people are like, I don't want to do daily stand up today. But keeping everyone engaged is critical. And I couldn't agree with you more. Hearing directly from the product owner, what is that customer need we're trying to satisfy? And getting the team truly engaged is really actually what you're ultimately after. And the fewer meetings they're in, the more engaged and focused they're going to be in the ones that they're supposed to be in or are in.
so, now I've already tried to poke holes in this with the developers, but then I can also really get on board with several categories of meetings that
Mhm.
you might get invited to, but really you have no contribution and they don't need you. You don't need them. They just invited you because you were part of a department or something like that. What are some other like scenarios where or categories or types of meetings that you think that we as leaders should invite our team to join or not join, or attend or not attend?
Well, I find that meetings that are around company communication are critical and important. So if there's like a quarterly all hands or a monthly QBR with your CEO or something that's going to facilitate communication across the organization, that feels critical because that's their opportunity to not only, receive information, but potentially share things of their own. Um, the meetings that are less productive, I find, are, often I'll see things like, say, someone from marketing has an idea for, a widget that they want on the site for a reason that they see fit. And maybe they'll call a meeting to share it with the product manager and they'll invite a couple of the senior developers and myself. And this isn't a fleshed out idea. This isn't a feature. This is like a kernel of an idea.
Hey.
And that's apparent to me from the invite, but a junior person sees the invite from a more senior person in another department and they think they're required to go. So that happens again, as the organization grows, it'll start happening more and more and more. And it's about what's the appropriate boundaries? And you really need to understand what's the purpose of this meeting? And who actually really needs to be there. And there's, of course, a difference between wanting to be there and needing to be there. And it's important to delineate that. And again, ultimately, you're looking to give people agency and control over their time. So people are smart, especially if you're on the tech team, I find, if I may say. So, and I think you have by nature an eye towards critical thinking. Otherwise, you couldn't be a good developer. So you probably have the skills to begin to think about, do I really need to be in this one? Is this something I can contribute to? And I just encourage my team members to if you're not sure, just come and talk to me or talk to your, your team leader and figure it out. But you don't really necessarily have to ask for permission. And if someone makes a mistake, that's not something that can't be corrected. You have a good conversation, why would it have been good for them to attend? And it's fine for the next time. So it's like treating people like adults and not children.
I see that this is kind of highlighting something about a responsibility that we have as tech leaders in how we structure our meetings and our processes. And I've got just one thing in mind that back to the developers,
Mhm.
kind of feeding from what you were just talking about, there may be some preliminary discussions about the product that they're trying to build that you may not need the developers. You might want to make it optional for them to join or not one of these early discussions about a feature, and where maybe it's the product owner and QA, and they're getting together to really hash out how should this feature behave. And maybe you don't, as the feature is kind of getting better in maturity and information and closer to the point when it's ready to be developed, maybe that's when the developers need to be required to be in a meeting so that they get to join the discussion at that point, get all the information, ask their questions, poke holes, but not necessarily be forced to be a part of the very early discussions when it's still so raw, this feature. But
Exactly. 'Cause that's when their contribution will carry weight. So one of the things that I really treasure a developer's ability to do, and even really the junior folks, is to poke holes in a product owner or other team leaders' ideas around how something should work, or what the customer's experience should be when using it. They will often highlight within code or problems that it arises, or suggests different ways to potentially MVP a feature. So that I find to be a fun and exciting and creative experience for teams. And I agree. But again, if you're at just a very proto stage of a feature where marketing and product and maybe even QA haven't truly connected on it, is it really the best use of the development team's time?
well, it may or it may not. Now, I could remember a few instances in my own past as a developer when we got presented with this concept, this feature, and it was way late in the process. All the important decisions had already been made, and they got to us, and we were like, "Well, that's not going to work. You should have been talking to us about this way earlier." There may be times when that's the case, and developers, there really would be a benefit to having the tech people, the tech team, to be involved earlier. But it's hard for leadership or product owners to know because maybe they're not as technical. They may not know, okay, this is the feature where I need to bring the developers in earlier. So I'm thinking about at least two things that we need to give people in the process so that they can make an informed decision about whether they should come to a meeting or not. And you may have other ideas too. One is the agenda. If every meeting should have an agenda. I mean, unless we
Right.
don't, if we don't have agendas, we're destined to be running around in circles or have meetings that take way too long. But if you're giving somebody the option to opt out of a meeting before it even starts, like just not even show up, then if they have an agenda that they can look at, then they can make an informed decision.
I agree completely. I mean, that's one of the benefits of having so much process and structure in development teams. Like, when we go into any of our sprint ritual meetings, we all know what the agenda is, and it's clearly written out and clearly stated and clearly understood by all those in attendance. And meetings with other teams may or may not have the same level of rigor in terms of planning agenda. And I've never met a CEO who hasn't said that he feels that every meeting should have an agenda, even if he or she doesn't fully practice that in reality. But so yeah, there's some organizational challenges that are always going to be there. I think
Yeah.
this isn't a one size fits all solution. It's really about like, how can you adapt to help make your team more productive and
Yeah.
give them some agency?
Yeah. Give them the tools that they need along the way so they can, uh, they can have that agency. They don't have the information they need, then
Yep.
you can give them the option, but they still may not be able to make the right decision. Um, I tend to use a lot of agenda templates. And so the agenda that I have might be just a copy of a generic template and doesn't have any specific information on it. So the other thing I was thinking of that we need to make sure we're giving our teams is like I don't know, the name of the feature somewhere in the agenda or the title of the event. So if you're going to have an event that's only about this one feature on the calendar, then label it. I haven't done this. I'm thinking out loud because I'm intrigued by this optional meeting attendance and thinking through all the things that my team would need.
Well, context matters. Context will always matter. And in the absence of that context, it's really hard to make good decisions. I mean, even the context of a ticket being given to a developer, you will likely see lots of pushback if that developer isn't given the context for that feature. So it goes all the way down the chain of your work stream. So when we're having meetings with larger and larger teams, like what's the context? Even if you don't have a fully fleshed out agenda, how do people show up prepared? What does being prepared for that meeting mean? Are you expecting me to say something or listen, or what am I supposed to do? Context matters.
Yes. Okay, so we have unpacked the concept. I think that we've done a pretty good job of understanding what we're talking about, what we're not talking about. So let's bring it back to the overall theme of this podcast.
Okay.
What does letting them opt out of meetings have to do with human flourishing?
Well, I'm going to bring up agency again. So I think agency and choice are critical for positive morale. We want to protect focus time for deep, meaningful work. And we want to ultimately build a culture of mutual respect. Because when people know they can say no, they show up more fully when they say yes.
Yeah, that's good. I think that it can also contribute to human flourishing because when you chose to come to a meeting and it's a little boring, you don't feel so resentful about it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're kind of forced to go to something and it doesn't feel like it's relevant to you and it's boring, then your resentment level just goes up automatically.
It's true. And it has an effect on the entire room. Everyone sees the person squirming in the chair because they have nothing to say, they're bored, or this is irrelevant to them, or they have a deadline and they're working on something. Everyone feels that energy. It's not limited to just the individual.
Yeah, and you bring up another thing, that's the anxiety that comes with trying to get to a deadline, and the fact that you're having to sit in a meeting and you're not allowed to be on your computer typing away, trying to get the finish line while you're in this meeting that feels like it's not relevant to what you're doing, and it's getting in the way of the deadline. All that just mounts up and increases your anxiety. So yeah, there are many ways that this is very, very well connected with human flourishing.
Agreed.
So if it's so good, why don't more leaders do it?
I'm a member of the LA CTO Forum. I've talked about this subject with more CTOs than I can count. I often see like a fear of their teams being disengaged. If they're not present at a meeting, that maybe if it becomes like a trend, what does that mean? Are they really engaged? Are they one foot out the door? Are they engaged in their work? And they're doing quality work? And I think meetings often become like proxies for visibility or control. Showing up to a meeting, again, can be this symbolic, well, they're at work, they're doing stuff, they're at this meeting. I can't tell you how many times someone had said to me, well, I had 6 meetings today, as a statement of accomplishment. And whereas it's really easy to get that line blurred, and something like this really helps add some clarity. And to that end, I think a lot of leaders, they don't have a lack of clarity and they don't have that context that we were just talking about. They default to meetings to achieve alignment with the teams, as opposed to, having it through, we have already these standing process meetings. There's your opportunities to meet with your teams one-on-one, et cetera. So I think in the absence of those things, it just creates a lot of fear of like loss of control.
Yeah, it's an insecurity thing. for sure. Well, maybe not every single time, but I
No, of
think
course
you're
not.
right. And I'm thinking about myself too. Sometimes it's easier to get the confidence that I need from my team when I'm in a meeting with them and I can hear what they say and I can hear their questions. I can tell that they're engaged by their body language and their just way of communicating in those meetings. And
Mhm.
man, if I could get that from a different way without spending, I mean, it's a spend. Every time I have a meeting with my team, I'm eating up budget
Yes.
instead of keeping them on the productivity track. So yeah, man, if I could get that confidence elsewhere, that would be awesome. And it's something that I think that all of us as leaders have to continually work at because it really is easy to kind of fall into the trap of just meeting to get what we need.
Right. I mean, but you always, even with this approach, I find it still important to stay in touch with folks and stay connected to people and make sure they understand this isn't a blanket opt out policy. It's really helping them focus their engagement. And our jobs as tech leaders is to really facilitate that.
Mhm. So let's just imagine that everybody out there is about as excited as I am to try this out and pick some meetings that are kind of optional. What are some pitfalls they're going to find along the way? Like, what are some ways they're going to mess this up that we can kind of tell them ahead of time?
Um, I think it's important you have to start with your own team's meetings rather than teams that are cross functional. Because I think there's a little bit of risk associated with beginning with cross-functional meetings. You know, you have other leaders, other departments who don't understand what you're trying to work on and why. And it's important to hey, let's do this slowly. So I think it's important to start with your own team. So again, we have our rituals that are important and we want to adhere to those and be respectful of them. But there's, how many other meetings have come up through the course of a work week? And every ad hoc meeting is okay, but that's a great place to start with the giving some control back to the team members. I'm finding that most meetings really only need 2 to 3 people actively contributing, and everybody else is either just passively listening, potentially actively listening, but not actively contributing. So it's about really finding that balance. You will notice that even at larger team meetings, you're still looking at a small number of people who are doing all the communicating.
So I'm sure that this is something you've been using and trying in your own team. So can you share about a time when letting people opt out of their meetings led to some unexpected outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, this was interesting. So I was working as a fractional at a large e-com brand, 9-figure brand. So they were established. They brought me in as a fractional, and they had a very large tech team and just a large business. Um, and counter to the CEO and, for that matter, the CEO's wishes, um, I made all of the recurring meetings that were interdepartmental in nature optional for my team. Not surprisingly, initially attendance dipped and antenna went up from the CEO, but they started to see engagement increase. So people were more prepared. They asked better questions, and we eliminated, I don't know, 20%, 25% of meeting time for individuals, because the meetings just were way more productive. Now, that actually exceeded my expectations, but it came from an organization that was extremely meeting heavy, and it was a large problem and was very consuming of not just developer time, but across the organization.
Hmm. I wonder if I'll bet you could spreadsheet that out too and actually show in dollars and cents the productivity savings or the cost savings of allowing people to skip out on those interdepartmental meetings.
The cost savings are very easy to calculate.
Yeah.
Just having fewer people there, having the right people there. You're also going to notice the meeting gets a little shorter too, because it's run tighter because there's not an extended period of people coming in and waiting and set up, everything becomes much more focused. Again, this doesn't replace communication. You're still responsible for communicating out. You may come to a meeting where you had some folks from your team opt out and you're totally okay with that. And while there was nothing they may have been actively contributing, it would affect them or their work or what they're working on. So it's still incumbent upon you to actively communicate back to your team, this is what you missed. And hopefully the meeting organizer had some materials that you can share. But again, I keep on saying context matters. People just need to understand, why are we doing these things?
So I would like to start doing this with my own organization. And I've got some ideas for how I'm going to implement this on my own side. Let's give everybody else just one very practical thing that they can start doing tomorrow to promote human flourishing in their teams. What could that be?
I'd say audit your calendar and your team's calendar. We all have visibility into each other's calendars these days. Find just one recurring meeting and make it optional.
Yeah, and get ready for some backlash from the CEO.
Get ready for the backlash from the CEO. Maybe share with him or her what you're up to and why, and get some executive buy-in but go for it. You have to make the change. And we all know things, as people, when your kid starts walking, they fall down on their face all the time, but eventually they start walking and running. And it's about, can you give your team that space to find that rhythm?
It's good.
But starting with one's a good place.
Yeah. I like it. I may take that advice myself.
Great.
Hey, Ben, this has been a great conversation. I think it's going to have a great impact on some people out there, and can't wait to hear from the comments from the audience, what they decide to do with this. And Ben, thank you for your experience, for sharing it with us, and for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Byron. Thanks for all your questions. Great questions. Really thought-provoking.
You got it, man. All right, see you next time.
Take care.
This has been another episode of the Team Amplifier podcast. Thanks for joining us. Now, get out there and be a team amplifier.